Welcome to the Dialed In Angling Podcast. We are sponsored by Strike Master Augers, Onyx Fish, and St. Croix Rods. This week, we're going to be discussing ice camping. You know, I'm fresh off filming an episode of ice camping. It's something that I've been passionate about, especially over the last few years. Super intrigued about. It's something that every ice angler should experience. If you're a ice fishing enthusiast, ice camping's one of those things that you can do. It's super affordable. You can get into some backwater lakes. You can get into fishing situations that you normally can't get into with your truck or wheelhouse or something like that. And it opens up a lot of opportunities early ice. You can get out there when the fishing's hot and experience camping overnight, but also catching lots of fish. With me this week, I have a special guest, Nick Lindner. I'd like to welcome you to the Dialed In Angling Podcast. This gentleman does a ton of ice camping. He produces a lot of fishing content in general. He's a friend of mine. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tony. No, this is it's been a fun year so far. I've been following along with what you've been putting up. Specifically, I've been watching on YouTube, and you've had a heck of a year so far, just sticking awesome fish and getting out with some good folks. And it's been fun to watch so far. But yeah, ice camping is a topic that I really like, just because for me, it's kind of a tool. And in a lot of cases, I'm catching more fish because of ice camping. A lot of that comes down to being on the water during key bite windows. So on a lot of our lakes around where I live specifically, it's a lot of clear bodies of water, and daytime can be difficult. But you can catch fish all night. But specifically, if you're on the water, set up in a good location, and you're not moving around, you're not pushing fish around. You know, at the moment, we don't have any snow on our lakes because it just rained. So as you're running around on the lake, you can push those fish around, especially if you're in deep water on really pressured lakes. But if you're in shallow water, hunkering down and being set up in the house during those key bite windows. So evening and morning is super key. But, nighttime is, on a lot of our lakes, nighttime is better than daytime. So that's, for me, it's a tool, and it's just being out on the water. Even like I've gone up to Rainy Lake, and to my knowledge, there's not as much of a night bite on Rainy Lake. But I like sleeping out there. Some people kind of like to equate ice camping with, rattle reels at night and catching fish, at night while you've got your cot set up out there. But for me, I just like to wake up right away in the morning on the spot. Like we were fishing the north end of Rainy Lake. And it's like, so what? We're going to wake up at 4 a.m. and, fire up our snowmobiles and drive an hour north. It's like, no, I'm just going to wake up, slip on my shoes and, just start catching fish right away and save, 2 hours of sleep in the morning.
Yeah, that's what's intriguing about ice camping. That's what I love about staying on the ice, is the fact that, you can wake up and you're immediately fishing. I like to sleep at night, to be honest with you. So there's a lot of times where I don't even put the rattle reels down. Same. Or I pull them up at a certain time because I want to get a little bit of rest, but I want to get up and start fishing. It's not just pulling up fish in the middle of the night. Yeah, that's fun. It's kind of a novelty thing, but I do a ton of guiding. So a lot of times I'll ice camp on the ice and then take customers out. I've done it many times now. And so I want to get a little bit of sleep at night. And so I actually pull the rattle reels up. Let's back up a little bit as far as ice camping journeys, like before you ever ice camped, right? I can think of the first time I saw somebody ice camping was one of the first hubs that really kind of hit the market. There was a guy on Mille Lacs Lake, and I got out there like literally dark 30. We're checking ice to get out there. It was really early ice conditions. Matter of fact, it was so early that I was worried about the ice. So we were out the day before poking around. We found some fish, but I wanted to get out there before my customers arrived and just check that ice, make sure it's still good. Nothing had shifted. There was no cracks, and we could get everybody out on a four-wheeler. So we get out in the dark, and I mean, literally, I could see kind of some reflective material out on the spot that we had fished the day before. And so I get out there and I tell Pete, one of my other guides, I'm like, man, it looks like there's someone already out here. which is weird because there was no one on the lake. There was only about 5, 6 inches of ice on Mille Lacs at the time. And we get out there, and sure enough, there's a hub set up like only about 100 yards down from where we had been fishing. And so I rip back to shore. We grab our customers. We get out there. And as we're drilling holes and moving around, this dude was just kind of waking up. And he walks over to me and he's like, "Oh my gosh, man, I must have caught 75 walleyes last night." And he kind of shows me this little cot janky setup he had. This was well before people were putting floors down and had all these cool things, accessories for ice camping. This dude literally just had a cot sitting on the ice, a couple of, a couple holes in the ice drilled. There was slush all over in his house. I remember he had a little grill sitting outside, and the dude was having the time of his life. And I thought, oh man, that's super cool. That guy really thought to just pop up a house and just camp out there. Because before hub houses, I had the flipovers, right? And I always thought, man, wouldn't it be cool, like in a resort flipover, like an otter resort, you could actually camp in this thing? Well, now with hubs, I mean, it's just opened up, a whole realm. I mean, there's a whole category now of ice camping. And, what was your first experience? Like, did you see someone on the ice, or were you just like, dude, I'm doing this, I watch videos? I mean, what was your experience?
Yeah, so I'm just like a little bit younger than you. So for me, I saw someone doing it on social media.
Sure.
So there was this guy who that I saw doing it up on Lake Manitoba, and he was the first guy. I guess maybe I had seen it before that, on social media, or maybe even on the lake or whatever. But I feel like anytime you see like a grill next to someone's hub, that's probably a giveaway that
Good indicator.
They've been out there for a little bit. Yeah. So this guy that I'd seen up in Manitoba, that was the first time that I'd seen someone like kind of take it to like level 2 or level 3, with the foam mats and like an extra table and like a nice looking cot set up. And I don't remember how many years ago that was, 10 years ago, whatever. That was my first time seeing it. And then, it was probably just like a couple years later after that. I think my first time sleeping out on the ice in a hub house like that was out on Mille Lacs, where it was, there weren't wheelhouses out in the mud or anything, but I took my snowmobile out there and set up a hub house and had my cot and didn't have a floor or anything, just didn't go like, I wasn't like crazy. And we'll probably talk about this later, but it's kind of like an evolution as you do it more. There's more things you realize you want, what would improve your experience, stuff like that. But yeah, I went out to the mud and caught, a few fish that were, few nice fish, and it was a great all around experience. And yeah, so that's I guess that's a little bit of my history with it. But yeah, first time that I did it was on Mille Lacs.
Yeah, you talk about the evolution of ice camping. It always starts somewhere, and then you decide, okay, where do I go from here? Like as far as the amount of gear, because you can start pretty minimally. If you have a hub house or even a flip over, you can ice camp, right? But it gets to be kind of a little bit overwhelming as far as space. Like, I always struggle when it comes to ice camping. Space and accessories, I want to bring as much as possible without overdoing it. And I think every time that I ice camp, it gets better and better. My first ice camping experience, I was pretty decked out, because I had watched all the videos. I had seen other people doing it. I had customers that would come out and fish with me and say, "Hey, we're going to ice camp," and then they'd kind of roll out their foam mats and tables and grill setups and outside tables and Bloody Mary bar. I mean,
Yeah.
I had a couple customers that had been doing it for a while, so I got to see the accessories they had and then start with my own. So last year was the first year where I really did like a deep dive into it. Me and my son, last year, as everybody knows, we had very little ice. We shooting dialed and angling. I was running all over. I was more concerned with ice conditions than I was like getting on fish, right? I mean, it seemed like Minnesota, parts of North Dakota had ice, and that was about it. But you could still access good ice fishing, even though it wasn't a great ice year. I had a ton of really great fishing experiences last year because there was no one out there, and you didn't have the traffic, you didn't have the noise, and I could explore lakes because there was no snow, right? I could get into these little backwood lakes. Well, it just turned into an ice camping experience. My first ice camping experience, we sight fished for trout. It was really cool. Um, I'm hooked on sight fishing, period. But to do it in an ice camping scenario was pretty neat. But we were decked out, it wasn't, I'm not the minimalist type, actually. Like I want it to be a cool experience. So every time I go out, my ice camping arsenal, if you will, or accessories builds. Okay. Now on the market today, there's tables, there's chairs, there's floor mats, there's hooks, little things you don't think about, like hanging up your bibs, right? And you don't want them dripping on your cots and anywhere near your stuff. So where do you place that? And then it's little mesh, you know, uh, cargo nets, for example, where you can hang your hats and gloves and get things out of the way. And then, once the clip-on rattle, I mean, there's just so many things you can add. And then on top of it, to be able to store that and bring it out when it's dry. Because I think the biggest part of ice fishing or ice camping would be trying to stay dry. That's my biggest battle. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. And from the dry standpoint, yeah, any like with the propane heaters, it's like you're fighting moisture. They're really super easy to use and, convenient, but you're fighting that. That's why some folks have gone to, if you're talking about the folks who are really decked out and, are just, they don't necessarily care how much time they're wasting or using not fishing. Like some of those folks will go out into the woods and cut trees down, or not cut trees down, but go find fallen trees and get firewood and actually do like stoves or whatever inside their setup and, and heat it that way for like a dry heat or whatever. But yeah, I mean, having hooks and stuff is critical. I mean, when I very, very first started, like I would jam my jacket, underneath the poles of my, or, tuck them in like the poles of my hub house or whatever. But having hooks and stuff is obviously super huge. But yeah, I mean, it's just something that evolves and you learn little tricks for over the years. I've learned different like little tricks for mounting mounting rattle reels on hubs and stuff like that. But now, basically every manufacturer, whether it's Otter or any of the other ones, pretty much all have, rattle reels that mount on hubs now with different accessories. And it's kind of cool. There's tables and there's stuff like that too. So yeah, I will also mention too, you talked a little bit about last year. For me, last year was actually, it's funny. Ice conditions obviously were not ideal for everybody, but last year was like by far my best ice fishing season, just as far as the bite. I just feel like it was early ice the whole year, and the fish were so snappy. It was such a fun year. Like it was if you loved fishing out of your truck, it was kind of a sucky year, but if you had a four-wheeler or even a snowmobile that you kind of know how to manage the high facts a little bit, like it was a really fun year last year. But yeah, back to ice camping.
Well, and the fish were shallow. No, it's, the fish remain shallow all year. We had that rain in January and they remain shallow. I mean,
every time it rained, the bite just got really good again. Like I think it was just the reoxygenation, the constant reoxygenation of the water. Like the walleyes it's like February and like they're biting like it's December. Last year was amazing.
The first ice camping experience we did last year, we were in like 8 feet of water and we were sight fishing. So we had sight fishing holes. I was a little nervous about camping over these sight fishing holes, to get up in the middle of the night but we didn't have rattle wheels. We kept our sight fishing holes off to the side. I was in like the monster lodge. So the biggest space you can possibly have, right? And
so you have one side where you can kind of keep all your stuff and sleep in one side and then have the giant sight hole kind of on the other side. Yeah.
But it was so cool to get up like as early as possible, how dark it was in that hole. We actually fished with forward face. I had a hole drilled with forward facing sonar. So I could see my baits, even though I couldn't see them with my eyes. And so we were catching fish, sight fishing, with electronics. And then as soon as the light started coming up, it was amazing how many fish were just zip, and just the mood of the fish, to be able to watch them with your own eyes, not on a underwater camera or on a forward facing sonar, but to watch them with your own eyes. You learn so much as an angler.
Yeah, 100%. Sight fishing is something I've done just a little bit, but I wish I would do it more. And then did you say when you did that sight fishing trip you were doing trout?
It was trout, yeah.
Yeah. And trout's like a famous kind of a famous one or a popular one to kind of sight fish and whatever. But yes, trout are super fun. They're zipping around and
Yeah, you have to net them in the hole,
yeah.
like literally brought
Yeah.
a net.
But
It
but
was
yeah,
super fun.
underwater camera is the same for me where it's you just learn so much. And like one thing that I've kind of learned is a lot of times I've found like, wow, I just move the bait way too much. And like a lot of times it's like, oh wow, I screwed that up because I jigged it one more time and like the fish was coming up to bite it, you know? Like, and so it's just one of those things where you learn a lot about like the presentation and just you can just increase your hooking percentage just by understanding what the fish is doing and knowing what you need to do to, you know, get a better hook in them kind of more than anything.
What I've noticed too is like over jigging, sometimes the fish, because it's winter, right? Their metabolism's a little slower. They react to the bait slower. So yeah, when you over jig and all of a sudden it's like they didn't even see you over jig. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like they didn't even notice
Yeah.
because, you know, a lot of times if I find myself over jigging like that, I tend to, well, I shouldn't say, I'm kind of like you where I tend to fish fast.
Yeah.
And so with like big baits.
Yeah.
So what I'll try to do is like, I know a lot of ice anglers have different style grips they like using. If I'm overfishing, I'll tend to go to like a pencil grip,
Mm.
and then it seems to help me slow down a little bit. Whereas if I'm just gripping that like rod like normal, I tend to like jig super fast and
Yeah.
beat the silt and bring it up. And
Yeah.
but when you're watching the fish, you see every little mood. You see what they like, what they don't like. I think a couple of really cool sight fishing bites that I can think of. Obviously, one is trout. Bluegills intrigue me,
Mm-hmm.
especially like in the weeds, because you have bass and pike and other species, crappies. So anytime you can fish in like green cabbage, I love looking down the hole doing that. And then third would probably be perch. I love
Yeah.
perch. They're
Yeah.
so fast and electric. And it's amazing when you're perch fishing really shallow, how many walleyes you see. Even like
Yeah.
midwinter where they're way up shallow. Even if they're not biting, they're cruising through that area. So at one point they're going to turn on. And so that's why, winter ice camping becomes so cool. So in addition to the moisture and the water and trying to keep things dry, I think hauling out gear, what I've learned with ice camping is like hauling my gear out in dry bags and trying to keep stuff dry. Cause like I pull everything out with like a big otter sled with a cover.
Yep.
And, it literally looks like, I'm sure when people watch this episode of Dialed in Angling, they're going to be like, man, that dude has a ton of gear. Or else they're going to be like, there's a better way to haul it, because I've never found the optimal way to haul all my stuff out, because you have layers, right? So I have chairs on the bottom, table, but I want to keep my cots up off the bottom because I don't want any water in the bottom of that otter sled. So I put that there. Then I put a dry bag. I've got this big like Lund hockey bag that I use. I got it in a tournament or something. I think I got it from Ryan Spruill from Lund, but it was this giant dry bag, hockey bag. It's massive. So it fits my blankets, pillows, anything I want to try to keep dry. I can even put my cots in there. So I put that on top. And then it's my flooring. And then it's, my stove, my grill, and I also have stuff in bins, like, the totes, like the Rubbermaid totes. And so I throw a giant otter cover on the top of that. I strap it down, and I can usually haul out, let's say like two of those great big Rubbermaid bins and then all my stuff. So it's very well organized. When you pull that up, I've got a coffee pot in there. I've got my cook stoves. I've got extra. I use a little butane stove, so I got extra of those. It's got my utensils, my cooking stuff. My other bin has more fishing, rattle reels, you know, fillet knives, anything you'd need there. But so keeping stuff dry is like on my first priority, because that first trip that I went out, everything got wet. And so luckily it wasn't that cold, but you don't want your sleeping bag wet and you don't want your pillows wet. It's just, it it doesn't dry out there. Like you were saying with the propane. I mean, I can see why some of these guys go to these wood stoves. How do you dry stuff out? That propane just does not. I mean, you've seen it with your tile floors, right? The click together floors. It's so hard to keep them dry. Um, what's your sort of strategy for packing and getting gear out there?
Yeah, no, for sure. I would say so my system, and I feel like it works real good. So first and foremost, my snowmobile is super decked out, and I can store like a lot of stuff on my
Okay.
snowmobile. So there's an auger mount. There's, I'll store my forward facing sonar unit on there. I got, a bucket that I can have bait or whatever, or just extra gear. And then I got the monster box in the back, which I always keep a ton of stuff. So like if I'm going fishing, like I'll just always have all of my stuff on my snowmobile. So like I don't really have to worry about fishing stuff per se. Inside, like as far as like my additional storage in the sled that I'm pulling behind me. So the monster box is actually, you can get a lot of mileage just out of that. You can store so much stuff in there. So usually I'll try and keep like my stuff that I want a little more protected up on the snowmobile. And of course, like it's just like for me, it's always a struggle because there's ice, like there's filming things, that I want to have. So camera things, or I might even bring my laptop out there if I'm going to do like any editing or a live stream or something like that. So like I kind of end up needing a little bit more gear. So anyway, I'll keep my fragile stuff up front with me. And then I'll just have the very, very largest size Otter pull behind sled. And you have a cover in there. And like, I'll just basically throw all that stuff in there where I can, a 20-pound propane tank. First thing I put in the back corner, and then just kind of pack it out from there. And then I'll end up throwing my hub house on top.
Do you bring an extra heater?
I don't, because well, I have before, yes, but usually I will not, and it just depends on where I'm camping. So like if I'm out on Mille Lacs and I know I can rip back to my truck, so like I will always have an extra heater with me, like somewhere in my system, whether that's bringing it out with me or it's back in my truck. Like if I have to run back to the truck and it's a 15-minute snowmobile ride there, 15 back, I can grab my heater. And
I find, to have things like that, like a little bit of redundancy, whether you bring it out or not, is key, because the first time I went out, I had heater issues. This was last year. This was prior to Heat Hog. This was a different brand.
Sure.
We had heater issues, and luckily I had brought 2 heaters with me because it was quite cold. There was no snow to bank the house with, and so the wind was blowing through, and we're having heater issues at 2 a.m. Luckily, I had that backup heater. I fired it up. We were comfortable. We were able to stay the night and, fish in the morning. Otherwise, I would have ruined the trip.
Yeah.
Nothing worse than having to go back at 2 a.m. to get a different heater.
100%. Yeah. I mean, if it happened in the middle of the night, it would be less than ideal. I would have wished I would have had it with me.
Oh,
but yeah, So I also have a Heat Hog, and I haven't had any problems with it. I didn't really have problems before, with my other heaters,
Sure.
But like anytime you're bringing that much gear out there, anytime you're out on the ice, like things break. It doesn't matter what brand it is. So it does pay to have a second option. Because you're clanging gear around and you never know what's going to bump into what and break. And, that's just the name of the game when it comes to ice fishing. So redundancy is huge.
Well, another thing that I found very intriguing is how, lithium batteries have changed the way I can ice camp. Think about lighting systems. In addition to being dry, I found lighting systems to be very key, right? These really light LED lights. I use like the Otter sells an accessory kit with lights that you can kind of string up in the rods, and they Velcro. They're really nice. You can run them off a small lithium battery and they last forever.
Yeah.
But having good lighting in there, I also have, some R12 lights that I have from Rapala that I can set around. You can either have them as a flashlight or a lantern. I like keeping my lighting up off the ice. We talked a little bit before the podcast about light and how it's fishing in general. That's why I love about the foam floor. I think it blocks a lot of that light. Okay. And you and I have both discussed that we catch a lot more fish, especially in shallow water, or if it's super clear water, when you shut the lights off. And so, but you also need that good lighting for like just being out there winter camping. The lithium batteries, like I touched on, you touched on working out in the house, being able to charge your laptop or iPad. If anybody watches this dialed in angling episode, they're going to see we actually watched a football game out there with the iPad, all the comforts of home. We had a blast. I did it by myself, but I had a camera guy with me. So we're watching the Vikings game. We're cooking food. We're catching fish. I mean, that's what the ice camping fishing experience is all about. But let's get back to this lighting thing, because it's intriguing to me about the light, because I deal with it in my wheelhouses too, turning the lights down, keeping the noise to a minimum, shutting the generators off, everything that's spooking fish. And light, especially in shallow or clear water, which we have a lot of around here, can affect your fishing experience.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I've had experiences where I've been out there and I've been fishing and it's 9:30. And a lot of times I will have lights on in my house just because I'm filming, and it's nice, for the camera to actually see the person on camera. So having lights is critical. But yes, the floor is actually as much as it's definitely a nice comfort thing. And, the great thing about having a floor is not only is it comfortable, you don't have to have your boots on. You're not making much of a slushy mess that you have to, wade through while you're sitting in the house or, whatever, going to reel up a rattle reel in the middle of the night. Obviously there's a comfort thing there, and it also helps with just heating, and it also helps with the moisture a little bit as well. But also just tactically, I do think it's an advantage at night because it is blocking the light. If you have any light in the house, like on some of these fisheries, especially the highly pressured ones, those fish can be extremely sensitive. Where I've had fish come in and you can see them kind of out on the edge on the forward facing sonar, and you can kind of tell that they are aware that you're there, and then you turn off all of your lights and make it pitch black. And all of a sudden that fish comes in and bites right away, but they didn't want to come in because the light. And I have run underwater cameras as well, kind of up north, and tried to get underwater walleye strikes and kind of kept that camera down throughout the night. And you can actually, so I went up in Manitoba and you can shoot lights down into the water at night. You can't legally do that in Minnesota.
Correct. Yeah.
So I had like a big spotlight down there, and you could see walleyes like skirting around the edges of the light. And every once in a while, you'd have one that would get a little bit brave and come in and look at the bait. But light is super critical. Having the floor helps block light. And then one thing and just ice camping is in like everything's always evolving, and what you want to do and what you want to bring out there is evolving. But one thing that evolved in my brain last time I was out was, so I have the floor, and I thought to myself, well, why don't I get some of those like foam insulated hole covers that people use for tip ups? And why don't I put those on every single one of my holes while I'm fishing at night to block all the light out? They have little slits in there. You can put your line in there, so you can actually be jigging through a hole that's completely covered. So that's something that I have not done yet, but I probably will do next time I'm on the ice.
Well, what I noticed in your videos is in your foam tiles, you actually cut a hole the size of a hole, whereas mine, I just leave the tile out. So it's kind of square. Well, there's a lot more light penetration there than just cutting that hole. And then what Nick's describing is putting actually a foam piece over the top of the hole and then a slit so you can jig through it. And like, that's genius, because light is a big key. You'd think that, people think fish are attracted to the light. It's not necessarily the case.
The bait fishes, you'll see a little cloud of bait fish underneath you, but the walleyes are very apprehensive of why there's a light there for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's a learned behavior. It's weird because, yes, bait. I mean, think about snook lights down in Florida. I mean, a lot of people put lights out, to track bait fish, but the fish in general just don't seem to want to come into it. And I've noticed that a lot, that light penetration is a huge key to success, especially at night. It seems like it doesn't bother them, during those peak feeding periods when they're really wild and stuff. But
Yeah.
it seems like in the middle of the night, you really have to turn those lights down. And once the lights go off, the fish start biting. Like you said, you watch their mood change. You hear the rattle reels start going off. So it's absolutely the light penetration. I would say when it comes to ice camping accessories, I like to trick my place out. I said it earlier in the podcast. I know there's a lot of minimalists out there that would probably watch the show and say, he doesn't need all that stuff. Unbelievable. I can't believe he drug all that gear out
You
there.
don't need it.
You don't, but it's so
but it's nice.
It's way more fun.
It's about the experience.
Yeah. Like for me, I have to have coffee in the morning. If I can have some coffee, I don't necessarily need breakfast, but if I can have coffee and start jigging right away. So that's the first thing I do is I set up that little percolator that I have. I get the coffee going while I'm fishing, because the percolator takes a little longer than a normal coffee pot at home. I know they make some small little 12-volt coffee makers as well. But for me, I need coffee in the morning. And so that's like a must. So that's got to fit in my kit. Also, if I'm going to do a camping experience, I don't necessarily need to cook fish all the time, but it is fun, especially if you're out there in the elements, if you're out away from everything. It's super easy to pack, a little bit of batter, fry some fish, a small thing of oil, or just some butter and seasoning. You don't need much when they're fresh fish. Also water. I like to have hand sanitizer. I mean, I like to have all the comforts of home, really, where it's not going to be uncomfortable out there. I know the first time that I went out camping, even having a floor that's kind of uneven, I don't like that. So I bring a shovel.
Yeah.
I like to shovel everything off, because I found if you shovel off kind of that floor space, right? And then I start putting my tiles down, and then I load my gear on top of the tiles. I only will put like half the tiles down, and then I unload all my gear. Okay. And then I, kind of cut my holes, and then I shovel that water away from there. And then I put the rest of the tiles down. Then I can kind of stage everything, kind of in front of my hub, whether it's tables, chairs, whatever else I brought. Now I can take my boots off. Everything's kind of dry back there, and then I can kind of stage everything. If I keep walking in and out with my boots, the tiles are wet. Another thing is I bring a little, another thing you don't need, but you accessorize. I have kind of a little mat or floor mat or rug where I put my boots on, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I take those off, and then I just wear like, Hey Dudes or Crocs or whatever you like wearing that's comfortable. And now I'm not tracking it in and out. I'm not tracking that snow in and out. I also try to, if there's snow, I shovel in front of my hub, just like I would like my wheelhouse, right? So that I'm not stepping into the snow and slush every time I'm going in and out to grab bait or, whatever.
Ice fishing is here, and it's time to hit the frozen water with OnX Fish. The Fish app is the most comprehensive fishing tool for increasing your confidence on ice. Use OnX Fish to find new places to fish and sort lakes by species, abundance, trophy, and keeper potentials. OnX Fish also shows you hot spots, lake by lake regulations, and private and public land ownership information. For a limited time, download OnX Fish for free in Minnesota and Wisconsin, or go to onxmaps.com/fish to get more information on the app that is changing the game on ice.
Sometimes I'll have a couple like extra foam mats kind of sticking out of my front door.
Okay.
So it's almost like a welcome mat.
Yeah, right on.
But yeah. So so one thing that's interesting too, like if you go on the Facebook groups and whatever, is like there's like a big argument, and it's like the shovel or no shovel crew. And like the no shovel crew. So like before you lay down your foam mats, do you shovel it flat right down to the ice, or do you leave the snow there? And I would say more people than not like to leave the snow there and put the mats on top. And they think that there's less long-term issues with, they're becoming more water in the house and whatever. I've actually personally had the opposite experience. It sounds like you shovel.
I'm a shoveler.
I'm a shoveler too. And I've found that if you shovel and you have the foam mat situation, you have less water in the house. One thing I would say too is that like another thing that it's so small, but it was a game changer, was cutting those holes in the foam mat and just having more coverage. Because if you're spending one night out there, it gets a little wet. You start to puddle up a little bit kind of around the holes if you have an open spot there, especially if you're running heat and whatever.
Sure, it insulates them a little better.
Yeah, but you'd think it would insulate them a little better. It insulates them a lot better.
Okay.
So you go all of a sudden from having, a little like kind of pools around the different holes, which isn't a huge deal. It's not like a really big deal because at the end of the day, that's where you're fishing and it's just in one spot, but if you do actually have that all insulated and just have a hole cut out in the middle of the foam mat, that makes a really big difference. But yeah, you had asked earlier, just like some of the random little quality of life things. And I mean, we've talked about it a bunch, but a floor and even having a few extra foam mats, I like to put them underneath, like where I'm not underneath where I'm sitting, but like where my feet would be while I'm sitting down and jigging. Just a little extra insulation is really nice. But we've talked about floors a lot. But
how do you organize yours? Because I struggle with that too. Like when I unclick them, Otter makes little straps that go around the hubs themselves, to cinch down the hubs.
I use those often. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I cinch mine down, and then I think my wife had like these IKEA bags or something. I
use those too.
Okay.
Those are the two things I use, is an IKEA bag and those little cinch straps. The cinch straps are awesome. Like every time, so I work with Otter, and like every time I put an order in, once per year, I'll throw in a few extra cinch straps. Cause like I'll cinch strap all types of things. Like I'm going to, my in-laws and we're spending the night there. Like I'll cinch strap like extra blankets and stuff, that's just a tool I'll use all the time, even for non-fishing things.
Those cinch straps from Otter are killer for this, great. but for ice fishing in general. And then I found you can't have enough ratchet straps. Like I have so many ratchet straps. Yeah. Some of them get wet or they get tossed in the bottom, or like you said, you keep your I keep all of my fishing stuff on my snowmobile or my 4-wheeler or my Ranger. I keep those in the back. Like I keep my, Markhams, my augers, everything that's related to fishing other than the ice camping accessories, I keep in my machine. And then all the ice fishing stuff I keep in the sled and in the totes and whatnot.
Yeah.
And even in the totes, I have cinch straps. That's how much I like those little black cinch straps. But what I find for organizing my tiles, because I have tiles that are clicked together, but they also have like the filler on the edges, so you can kind of round out your floor mats.
Yeah.
Well, I can never seem to get them all clicked back together right. And I'm always pulling those little pieces off. Do you use those, or how important do you find to get that thing as tight as you can to the edges of the fish house? Like, do you not put your ice anchors in until your floor is complete? Or do you put your ice anchors in first? Because I've had it where it's been wonky, and so you have kind of an edge of ice. Right?
So I like to wait before I put my ice anchors in. But that bit me in the butt last time I was out because It was flat calm when I set it up, and I'm putting up my floor and getting that all set up. And then all of a sudden it just starts ripping just out of nowhere. The wind starts blowing super hard. It's like, where the heck did this come from? So that was a little bit of a process that kind of sucked. But yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of times what I like to do is I like to get a couple stakes in just to make sure your tent's not going anywhere. And then I'll start setting up the foam mats. And actually the first thing I do, so generally what I like to do, and part of it is because I film, but I think I just kind of like this setup in general, is I like to drill the holes right in the middle of the house. So,
okay.
So I'm usually camping, but I'm also maybe camping in a different configuration than some people. Like a lot of people, it's gotten really popular to camp out of the Monster Lodge, where it's basically like that double hub setup that are side by side. And a lot of people will they'll run like the sleeping stuff on one side and the fishing stuff on the other. And I think that's a great setup, and I might get one of those for next year. We'll see. But what I've been doing is like I've been sleeping out of the resort, which is the 6 or 7-sided, whatever.
So that's the resort's kind of octagon shape.
Yes.
Because I've seen your videos where you're sitting on your cot fishing.
Yes.
Whereas I'm more of the Monster Lodge type where my people see it in this episode as a dialed and angling, but I like my sleeping quarters to the back.
Yep.
And then,
which is an awesome system.
Business in the front.
Right. And so I'll drill like a few holes in the middle. And I'll drill them all in line so that I can put my forward facing sonar down and see all of the holes in my whole camping setup. And then I'll have my cot pushed up against the side wall there. And then I'll just jig off the cot, and that's comfortable enough for me. But one thing I'll do is like, I'll line up like my mats with the holes in them. And I'll pre-drill those holes out, or maybe like half drill them and then pull my mat out of there, put that outside. And then I'll actually go and I'll drill all those holes before I set up any mats. So you don't have any, slush all over the place. I don't know. Maybe you could use like that Yeti slush bucket thing or something that might work, if you already had your floor set up. But I'll wait to set up my floor. And then I will, I'll cut the holes and I'll lay the floor in, and then I'll bring all my gear in. I like to actually set up my cot right away, because then I can throw a bunch of gear on the cot while I'm just organizing and getting everything set up. But a few other quality of life things that I've really enjoyed is, so for me, just like a good cot. I know our buddy Brett McComas, he's got like this like King Tut cot. It's like twice as wide. It's like fancy kind of. But so I just have a cheaper cot, but it's nice and firm, which is what I like. And then I'll put a mat on top of that. And then one of the biggest things, I would say the biggest thing that I've invested in that has made ice camping way better for me is a really, really good sleeping bag. So I actually just went on eBay and bought like a used army bag, and those are super warm. They say you can curl up in there and go lay out in the Arctic, and you're going to be, warm all night. And I think I had problems the first few times I slept out there with just sleeping very good. I just slept really bad. And I think a lot of it was just associated to being a little bit cold. So getting like a really good sleeping bag is super critical, or it was for me. But the totes are really huge as well. For just staying comfortable. So like the first time I brought a tote out here, I was like, this is amazing. I can throw my random stuff in the tote and not have it laying around kind of back behind my sonar setup or whatever. And, but yeah, I love the holes in the middle. And then one thing I started doing is Otter came out with these like little, black, tables, and they're super sturdy, and they snap in. And yeah, I'll set two of them up next to each other right behind my line of holes, and I'll set my forward facing unit on top of there, and then I'll just have all types of random stuff. It'll just be like a catch-all table, I'll just throw stuff on. So that's kind of been a nice quality of life thing too to have.
Yeah, I usually bring like a big collapsible table that's like for my cooking stuff and lights and kind of catch-all. But these collapsible Otter tables are really a game changer. I do use mine all the time. I tend to set them up more towards the holes because I like to have my sonar units a lot of times off the ice, so I'm not staring down at them. And so I'll either put the sonar units on there, or I'll set them, next to the holes where I can keep tools and different things sitting there. Because in the middle of the night, especially if you're going to chase a rattle reel, you want to be able to grab pliers, and where they're at, and they're sitting on those tables.
Yeah.
The other thing, you touched on the totes. I use my totes in the back, kind of in my sleeping quarters, as a table. And so I set like batteries there. I set lights there. My phone, my charging accessories, little charging banks, things like that all get set on top of that. And then I'm with you. The first time I winter camped, I think the biggest mistake I made was that cot. My cot was super uncomfortable because I was excited to just gather as many winter camping things as I could think of. Like I took a piece of notebook paper, and I wrote down everything that I wanted to get for ice camping.
That's critical, by the way. So I've done this a number of times. You have to have
A list.
a checklist, and you have to go down it, and you have to check every time you take something and throw it in your truck, because there's so much stuff
Yes.
that you are gonna forget something that's important.
Well, and I keep my totes together all year. So like I have kind of a little shelf in my basement. I keep all my ice camping stuff together, so it's like, my cots sit on that shelf, and then my totes sit there. Everything is together so that I don't forget anything. But yes, I still go through the checklist. But when I was purchasing things, I made a checklist of things I wanted to buy: the floor mats, how many I needed, the cots, the sleeping bags, and my cot in particular was like the worst cot ever because it had like this big bar that goes across your back. So I didn't get any sleep. I ended up getting up at like 2 a.m. and just fishing, and I was miserable. And, it kind of took away from that first experience because I was so miserable. You could not sleep on that thing. And so since then I bought air mattresses. The only problem with the air mattress, they're great. They're like the foot pump, like cheap ones. I got them on Amazon or something. They're absolutely fantastic for comfort. But they're squeaky. They make a lot of noise, because they're plastic.
Yep.
They got a little bit of, it must be like a soft material on there, but they're kind of a little bit noisy. I guess I have to look at McComas's King Tut because now you got me intrigued because being able to sleep comfortably is key. I still use like my old janky sleeping bags that I got when I was a kid. I've had the same sleeping bags, I swear, since I was a teenager, and they're really comfortable, nice sleeping bags. They're not like Arctic type of bags, but they are comfortable. But anybody who watches Dialed In Angling will see my sleeping bags and be like, they're not like a superhero sleeping bag, but they're not far off. That's like something I got when I was a teenager. I know I got them for Christmas from my parents because my parents had them forever. Now we like adopted these sleeping bags. And so I've just thrown them in my ice camping kit because I've never camped when it's like 30 below. I've always gone when it's fairly nice.
It's really cold when you do that.
Right.
It gets pretty cold in the hub house, especially when the wind picks up. It's like, isn't it supposed to be less windy at night? Why is it more windy now? Like
I did, when we filmed Dialed In Angling, the weather wasn't terrible, but the wind was ripping. I mean, absolutely ripping. Actually, well, you'll see in the episode, but I always go and kind of look for fish first, regardless if I'm going to set up a hub house or just fish for the day or set up a wheelhouse. I'm always looking for fish. I want to be in the most optimal spot for fishing. So I spent time fishing outside, and the wind was just howling. I was kind of hunkered down below my snowmobile, just kind of blocking the wind, trying to find fish in this area. Found a spot to set up. And I literally had to put in all the ice anchors. So my tiles weren't exactly square with my house. It was like trying to kind of hurry up and get in there because it was so cold, but with the heaters going, we had the heat hugs going. The temperatures weren't terrible, even though it was windy. And that house, you can't really tell it's windy in there. I mean, when people watch the episode, they'll see kind of the outside shots of the drone shots and stuff we took. And you can tell it's windy. But inside the house when we're filming, it's not moving around. I mean, if
you stake everything down properly.
Yeah.
If you stake everything down properly, you can leave a big hub house like that out there, like on the lake for the whole winter, Yeah. Like it's not going anywhere.
No, we strap down everything. I've learned just from guiding that strap those things down. If it's a hub house, strap it down. Especially when you don't have a lot of snow. It's going to move. It's going to vibrate. I hate when the houses are making noise. So I'm always adamant about strapping these things down. And so we did that. Knowing full well we'd be filming, we didn't want vibrations and things. And you couldn't tell. There was hardly any wind noise. But when you're sleeping and the ice is just booming and that wind is ripping, like you said, you'd think, gosh, is it going to calm down? Because it's the middle of the night and it is roaring outside. And actually the next morning it sort of got calm when we were packing up. So it's kind of nice to be able to pack up out of that wind. But staying in there all night long, man. It's amazing the things that you start thinking that you're missing, even though I
Yeah.
have this checklist, and every time I ice camp, I'm trying to improve my situation. I find things actually that I maybe don't need to bring, but I find a lot more things that I do need to bring. Wrapping up here, I don't want to talk a whole lot longer, but I just want to get your take. Like, is there destinations that you want to go in ice camp that you haven't experienced yet? I mean, I know for me, I do want to experience getting out there when it's really cold. I do want to try doing this in areas that I haven't fished before, whether it's, backwoods lake situations or, places in North Dakota or Wisconsin. I could think of a lot of different states in which I want to fish and a lot of different fishing experiences that I want to experience, but I want to ice camp doing it because I want to stay out there. Like you said in the beginning, Rainy River or Rainy Lake, being way up on Rainy Lake rather than getting up out of your cabin in the morning and then taking a snowmobile ride, you're already there.
That's enormous. And that that alone makes the answer well, everywhere I want to fish. Like, I'd love to go to Sakakawea. I'd love to go to, Last Mountain. I'd love to go to all these different places. And it's like, well, I'd love to camp at all those places. And maybe not even because the night bite, but just because you wake up in the morning and you're on the spot where you were creaming them in the evening. A lot of times, on lakes like Rainy Lake, where there's not much of a night bite, I won't try and fish out of my hub house, and I won't try and set up my ice camping setup, and try and catch the evening bite. I'll just fish, and then it's well, where did we cream them that evening? Okay, I'm gonna set up the house, and maybe it gets a little late because it takes some time to set up the house, but we were creaming them right here on this point, and of course they're gonna bite in the morning if they bit in the evening. But that being said, specific destinations. So I was lucky enough to get to go up and spend the night in a Yeti on Lake Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And that was you would not believe how many fish that we caught after everybody went back in. Because people don't like to travel on Lake Winnipeg at night, a lot of the guides and a lot of the people staying up there want to get off the lake. So.
Yeah, get a little light while you're traveling. I'm the same way. I've been up there a million times.
Yeah.
And so you leave kind of when that peak bite
at least for us on this particular trip, and I don't know if it was because we were set up shallower or what it was, but we caught so many, almost all of our fish, after sunset. And it was a tough bite up there at the time because we were in contact with a lot of guides, and they would have some of the guides are the good guides, the really good guides, they'd have a group of 5 or 6 folks, and they would catch, it was tough, and they had maybe caught 5, 6 fish or something for the group. And we caught 18 that evening, before we went to bed after the sun went down. So that lake is really interesting. And I got to do it in luxury once, but I want to go up there with my tent and go and do that. So that's one, and that is definitely going to happen this winter. I'm for sure going to do that. And 2, I really want to go and spend the night on the Rainy River. So target sturgeon. So I've already heard folks going and doing that, and just to catch a sturgeon through the ice would be just a huge bucket list thing for me. And it's accessible and somewhat close to home. But that's one of those things where, man, that definitely pays to spend the night out there. And I don't think I would really do that unless I was planning to spend the night out there, because I think, and like I said, I haven't done it before, but my understanding is that they catch a lot of those sturgeon at night. So specifically to be out there all night and set up, for multiple nights would be ideal. So that's something I would really like to do, and I'll probably do this year. But those are the 2 main things. I honestly, the last couple of weeks, I've just been thinking about going up to Lake Winnipeg. I've got lots of fishing I should still be doing around home, and I have been, but all I can think about is going to Lake Winnipeg and camping out there.
It's I've been going for years up there. It's a great fishery. Obviously the size is what's intriguing. Those giant greenbacks was the reason that I first started going up there. Oh man, over 15 years ago. But I've never stayed out there overnight. I've never experienced the night camping. I have friends that bring their wheelhouses now, and they talk about how awesome it is out there at night. I have yet to experience that. I want to do that. The only thing that scares me about Lake Winnipeg is I've been out there in some major, you want to talk about wind?
Yeah. Yeah.
Major blizzards, ground blizzards, whiteouts. We had one time it was like 30 below. The wind was roaring. It wasn't even snowing, and it was just a whiteout. We rode our snowmobiles out, and we didn't get out there till it was plenty light. We had to anchor down our flip overs with our snowmobiles. You could not take your sled. You could not unhook your hitch from your sled. Otherwise you're blown away. You had to put your back to the wind, and someone had to be in that flip over the entire time. Like if somebody got up to go get tackle or grab something or go talk to our buddies, one person had to sit in there the whole time. Otherwise that thing was blowing away. I mean, the wind would scare me out there for winter ice camping, but the intrigue of catching fish, I might overlook that stuff.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I've always I've asked people, because I haven't gone to Winnipeg a bunch of times, and they call it big windy,
Sure.
And my understanding, I always thought man, you got to be careful on Lake Winnipeg. That's what I've always heard, so I've asked friends, is it safe to sleep out on Lake Winnipeg in a tent, and what I've come to is yes, but be careful and have a group, because as long as there's, a few people and you can stay in contact. Yeah. I mean, but if you're out there by yourself and you're not in contact with anybody else who's on the lake, I mean, that's kind of a scary thing, but it's like Mille Lacs too, right? Where it's if you're out there and something bad happens, if you call one of the fishing guides or one of the resorts, or there's not the resorts on Winnipeg, but if you call the fishing guides, they've got tracked out pickup trucks and they'll come and help you out and whatever.
Yeah, I would say if someone's seriously looking into doing it, I would contact one of the guides up there, because I know the guides haul out houses and stuff with their track machines. So I would contact them, just to say, hey, put me on a spot just for peace of mind. Even if it costs you, I don't know what the cost would be, but even if it costs you a couple $100, well worth it. Any winter ice camping experience, let everyone know where you're going, what you're doing, because especially if you get into these backwoods situations where you don't have self-service, your cell phone dies, something happens, you run out of heat. These are real scenarios that can escalate quickly because it's winter. And, it looks like the temps are really going to start to plummet here. We've had kind of a warm up here the last few weeks. Temps are really going to start to plummet. If you're going to do some ice camping, do it safely. Make sure you're letting people know where you're at, bringing extra heat sources, being smart about it, and it can be a lot of fun. I absolutely love it. It's something that will be part of my fishing experience from here on out. I love winter ice camping. I had a blast shooting this episode of Dialed In Angling. I truly appreciate you coming on the podcast with me and talking about your ice camping experiences. Nick does a ton of it. You're going to want to follow Nick on social media. Everywhere Nick Lindner goes, he's got a camera with him, and the guy's always on fish, and he's always looking for cool experiences. I enjoy watching Nick's everything that Nick puts out. So thanks again for coming on with me. And everybody listening out there, we encourage you to watch Dialed In Angling. We've got a great episode coming up for ice camping. I'll show you how I kind of trick out things, how I go through things. Hey, I'm not an expert. I'm learning as I go. I learn from people like Nick. So I think it's a really fun experience. It's something that you're going to enjoy. So we appreciate you tuning in every week. Nick, thanks for being on the show with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And honestly, I'm excited for this next episode, because I promise you, I've watched every single video on the internet on ice camping, because once you've done it, you've got to check out everybody's setup. What do they do? What can I steal from them? And I'm definitely going to watch this week's episode, and I'm sure I'll end up stealing one or two things too. So
Right on, man. Well, good luck fishing the rest of the winter. To the listening audience out there, good luck to you. And hopefully this podcast helped you get dialed in.